So in this video we're going to discuss our third market structure. It's what we call monopolistic, or sometimes called imperfect competition. And so this is going to be a market structure that kind of falls in between perfect competition and full-blown monopoly. But as we're going to see, it tends to gravitate a little bit more towards the perfect competition end of the spectrum. So just real briefly, the features or characteristics of a monopolistically competitive market. With respect to the number of buyers and sellers, we still have a sufficiently large number of buyers and sellers, so very similar to perfect competition. Now, each individual firm in this market, again, is not really going to have too much power to influence the overall market. And so they're, in effect, going to be like perfectly competitive firms. But because of another feature we'll talk about in just a second, each of these individual firms, while they can't affect the overall market, what they are going to be able to do is control their market for their particular good or service. And because there are so many firms in a monopolistically competitive market, like perfect competition, there's really not going to be any incentive to try and monitor all of the other firms in the market, because it would just take too much time and money to try and track all of your competitors. So, large number of firms. No single firm can influence the entire market, but they're each going to control their own little slice of the market. And the reason they can do that is because of the second feature, and that's what we call product differentiation. So you may recall that under perfect competition, we said that firms were producing identical products. We experienced product homogeneity. You could not tell one firm's product different from any other firm's. But now under monopolistic competition, each firm is going to be able to slightly differentiate or greatly differentiate their product from somebody else. And so we mentioned in class, a Big Mac, right? Nobody else can produce the exact same Big Mac that McDonald's has, because there's a legal barrier. They have a patent, a trademark that protects the Big Mac. But there are obviously a lot of other cheeseburgers out there, some that are very close to a Big Mac, others that are very different. But again, there's nothing quite like a Big Mac. So again, it's just part of the overall cheeseburger market, but McDonald's is going to control their little slice, or in case of McDonald's, a very large slice perhaps, of that market. So we've got a large number of pretty close substitutes. So unlike the full-blown monopoly, in which there probably weren't many, if any, close substitutes, under monopolistic competition we have very close substitutes, a large number of them. But not quite to the point where they become perfect substitutes as they were under perfect competition. Now, with respect to perfect information, obviously when you have a trademark, a copyrighted patent, such as the secret sauce for Big Macs, that's obviously going to create a legal barrier to anyone else producing the Big Mac, because they're able to protect that information. So there's not quite perfect information, but everybody knows you can get a Big Mac or a quarter, or a Whopper or a Jumbo Jack, and you have a pretty good idea of the differences between them. And then finally, the barriers to entry and exit. There's no significant one, so it's pretty easy if you want to start a hamburger shop to just start cooking hamburgers somewhere. But obviously, the patents, the trademarks, such as the Big Mac, that's going to create a slight barrier to entry, because at the very least, no one else can get into the Big Mac market. Now, the big thing that is going to distinguish, or that we're going to have to also consider under this market structure, is the importance of promotions and advertising and branding. Because under perfect competition, remember that every firm is producing the exact same thing. And so in a perfectly competitive market, there's really no reason for a perfectly competitive firm to try and advertise. Because the minute you start advertising for your product, remember, it's a perfect substitute for other firms' products. Well, if you advertise yours, you're effectively advertising for everybody's product because they're identical, which means you're going to be spending money to advertise, but you can't guarantee that the people who see the advertisement are going to come and purchase your product. Now, under monopolistic competition, it might become worth it to actually engage in advertising and spend the money to advertise, because now, when you advertise, you can say, hey, I make a cheeseburger, and yeah, lots of other people make cheeseburgers, but here's why my cheeseburger is different. And not only different, but here's why my cheeseburger is better and worth paying for. And if you can do that successfully, well, yeah, you're going to spend some money engaging in advertising, but then the hope is that you're going to attract more customers. You're going to sell more of your product. So McDonald's sells more Big Macs when it advertises for Big Macs, and hopefully in the end that generates an even larger increase in revenue than there was in costs, which means there's a net gain in profit. So it comes down to a simple cost-benefit analysis. We may, have an advertising campaign all planned out. We identify how much it's going to cost, but then the question is, how much do we expect to sell in addition to what we're already selling. And so we've got to be able to project those revenues, compare them to our cost, and decide whether the cost outweighs the benefit or the benefit outweighs the cost. Now, with respect to choosing a price and an optimal quantity, this is going to be just like it was for the other market structures, but a little bit more similar to the monopoly. So again, we're going to choose a profit maximizing level of output such that marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So when we look at our cost structure, that zeroes us in on a particular quantity. And then just like the monopolist, we need to go back up and look at our demand curve and say, okay, at that quantity, what price can we charge? Then we generate, we calculate our revenue. But then we also go back and see, well, okay, at that quantity, what's the cost per unit? That allows us to calculate costs. And then we can calculate our profits and see if we're actually profiting or losing or breaking even. Now, a little bit more about advertising. And again, with advertising and brand names, what we're really trying to promote and communicate and share with our customers is our differentness, right? If our product wasn't different from anyone else's, there'd be nothing to advertise. We want to, really accentuate why our product is different and better. Now, when it comes to advertising, there's kind of some pros and cons of it. There's some, reasons why people might support advertising, but there's also some, critiques of advertising. And so some of the critiques are that ads can become manipulative, right? It's one thing to communicate with customers and say, hey, here's our product and here's why it's different. It's another thing to communicate with customers in a way that convinces them or maybe even misleads them into thinking that there's something different that's really not, or that there's some value or quality that exists when there's really not. So some might argue that, firms are just trying to manipulate or trick us into purchasing their product. Another thing that this might do is create what we call an artificial demand. If firms can convince more people to purchase their product, that leads to an increase in demand. But the question is that demand because customers really know and want this product, or is it because they've somehow been manipulated into wanting and being willing to purchase this product? And that means if they're increasing their demand for one product, are they perhaps foregoing consumption of another product that might actually benefit them more, might actually generate more utility? And then again, like I think I already said, we may have a tendency or an incentive to try and overstate our differentness, to try and convince people there's something that's not really there. And another argument, against ads some people make is sometimes it doesn't even really tell you much about the product. So for example, how many times have you been watching TV and you look up during the commercials and you see some, famous actress or model prancing around in, some evening gown, and then something drops from a chandelier, or a guy drives by in a car, or she's looking at the stars over a balcony, and for a second you're asking, what is going on here? And then it says Chanel, right? What does that advertisement even tell you about the product, right? In this case, it doesn't tell you anything about the product. It doesn't tell you what it smells like. It doesn't tell you whether it burns when you put it on. I mean, maybe it doesn't smell very good at all. But again, the ad doesn't tell you anything about the product itself. So what is the ad trying to tell you? Well, maybe it's just trying to tell you that, hey, we're Chanel. We're so awesome. We don't even need to tell you about our product. We're just so awesome. We can spend big money hiring Julia Roberts or whoever to star in our commercial. And that's just going to convince you that we're awesome, and we obviously make so much money because we're so awesome, and we can afford to throw it away in a commercial, and somehow that magically convinces people to buy Chanel. Again, they're a firm. They want to maximize profits, and whatever works for them works for them. But again, are they overstating something? Are they inducing, creating artificial demand? Or are they just trying to manipulate customers? So those are all some critiques that we might have about advertising. Now, some defense of advertising is that a lot of the times, ads can communicate very valuable information. Information about the product itself, product features and details, about the prices of the products, or about the places where you can purchase them. So we can actually gain a lot of information as consumers when we view advertisements. And in some cases, it may even make markets more competitive, because let's say that I'm some burger shop, on one end of town, and there's a burger shop on the other end of town, and that burger shop starts making ads saying that their burgers are better than my burgers. Well, who's to say whose burger is better? But maybe that makes me think, well, maybe I could make my burgers better, or maybe I could do something to lower my cost to make my burgers more affordable, or maybe I might try to do something with my restaurant and decorate it or something to try and give people a better dining experience. So by the other firm advertising their product and trying to highlight the differentness and generate sales, it may actually encourage me to compete and try to offer a better product at a better price in order to maximize my own profits. So, I believe that covers it for our study guide. Again, we're talking about just the features of monopolistic competition. Talked about why they would engage in advertising, what are the critiques and defenses, and then finally, what condition will determine whether we should actually advertise. Well, again, it just comes down to cost versus benefit. If we expect to generate more revenue in sales from an ad campaign than the ad campaign cost us, then that would be net positive. So it would be in our self-interest to engage in the advertising campaign. So that covers it for monopolistic competition.